My name is John Burnberry. I'm on the board of the Bay Area Independent Publishers Association, BAPA, and I'm going to be talking today with Nita Winter and Rob Badger, authors of Beauty and the Beast, California Wildflowers and Climate Change. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Nita, Rob, welcome. Why don't you tell me about you and your book?
Okay, well, I've been a conservation photographer and environmental issues photographer for about 40 years. And our book all started in 1992 when I was with a friend of mine in a photo lab, and she said, hey, the Antelope Valley California Poppy Reserve, about an hour's north of Los Angeles in the Mojave Desert, is having a really good year after 6 years of drought. She says, I imagine you've been down to the preserve and you photographed there. And I said, no, I've never been there. She said, you're a nature photographer in California. You've never been to the Poppy Reserve? I sheepishly said, no. She said, we have to go, and we got to go soon. So I went with Liz, and we met another friend, and it was something I'd never seen before. In front of me, for as far as I could see, was this expanse of beautiful golden glowing, California poppies, golden and orange, and then there were waves of wind going across these fields of flowers, and it was just mesmerizing. What made it a really special year was that there were these purple flowers, bird's eye gilead, that were interspersed within the this whole field of flowers. So I called Nita that night and I said, you have to come see this. So I drove back to to San Francisco from an hours north of LA. We came back and we started our wildflower photography in 1992. That's what started this.
Yeah, we were hooked at that point.
Yeah.
I had been a people photographer, but
Are both of you photographers, or do you both do the same amount of photography, or is one of you more focused on one thing and one the other?
well, Rob was a nature photographer when I met him and doing some environmental work. I was a people photographer focusing on creating healthy communities, celebrating diversity. And when we went out and saw those flowers, we were just both hooked. And eventually I stopped doing the people photography and joined Rob out in the field. And we say that the work is his, hers, and ours. And most of the landscapes in the books are Rob's. And then the floral portraits really take teamwork. And so that's why.
I see that the climate change is one of is in your subtitle. And in the 90s, some people were talking about climate change, but mostly it was sort of threats in the future. And now, of course, we're in a situation where those threats have come to pass. So in the time you've been photographing wildflowers, how have you seen climate change impact what you photographed?
Well, the first amazing wildflower bloom we saw was after a heavy El Nino rain event in 1998. And they were calling that a 100-year bloom because at that time, all the conditions that came together to make this amazing rare bloom happened only on an average of 100 years. Well, about 7 years later, there was another 100-year bloom, and about, but 3 or 4 years later, there was another one. So because of climate change has created these cycles of drought and deluge. So that's one thing we've seen. And
to the point where they actually changed the name from 100-year blooms to super blooms. That's what people hear about these days.
So that's one thing we've seen. And then when we've been photographing in these areas, these invasives that have come into the state from other countries have taken advantage of this abundant rainfall during these deluge years. And so these invasives are fast growing. They cover the ground quickly, like the
is the mustard one of those?
Mustard.
Yeah, it's still beautiful.
Yeah, but so climate change is making it easier for these invasives to take over these wildflower habitats, and then with drought, and then with snow not accumulating as much in these drought years. And then with climate change warming the planet, the snow is melting out more quickly. So it's affecting the flowers. Sometimes the flowers are blooming too early in the frost, and when it's still a frost period. I mean, there's a whole study on the different ways that climate change is affecting wildflowers. Plus, they can't migrate to cooler areas in the alpine and subalpine areas. A lot of these beautiful wet wildflower meadows are being dried up, and brushes, shrubs, and trees are invading these beautiful meadows, and that's been documented. So, I mean, there's a lot to talk about.
Well,
That's-
but don't, go ahead, Nita.
I was going to say, so we're experts at finding and photographing wildflowers. And so we wanted to give a voice to wildflowers and tell their story, both around, and part of the focus was on climate change and habitat loss. And so we went and found experts, scientists who were studying this, nature writers who are writing about what you can do to make a difference, such as being a citizen science, et cetera. And so there are a number of short nonfiction stories from the viewpoint of the writer and the work that they're doing to educate people in a engaging way, to make science more accessible.
You mentioned the term citizen scientist. Can you tell me how that works, what that means?
Well, citizen science, Darwin was one of the most famous citizen scientists. Jefferson was. These are people who are interested in science, but didn't have degrees. And so today you can become a citizen science with your iPhone and go out and photograph the natural world around you and upload it to websites like iNaturalist or Nature's Notebook. And it allows scientists to collect data that's being collected by citizen scientists all over the world. And it helps them with their research. So you can become part of the whole research community by simply documenting life around you.
Right. So if wildflower populations are impacted by climate change, how does that impact other, like wildlife, like animals and things like that? Are there examples you can think of where a change in when a bloom shows up, when a wildflower explosion happens, how that impacts the rest of the ecosystem?
Yeah, excuse me. We have a wonderful essay in the book called
You want me to, I'll take over. He gets all choked up. Called
Emotional for you, huh?
Yeah, very emotional. Called Chasing Spring, Timing is Everything. And it talks specifically about how climate change is affecting the rufous hummingbird and its epic migration from Mexico to Alaska. And it depends on the mountain meadows blooming at a certain time, so it has fuel to make it all the way. And if there is not enough snow, the flowers bloom earlier than the hummingbird gets there. If there's too much snow, it could bloom later. We've been up in the mountains 3 to 4 weeks in blooms that are 3 to 4 weeks later than normal. And so Ryan Burnett is studying the rufous hummingbirds in the meadows to see how climate change is affecting it. And that's true of a lot of different pollinators as well. And that affects both the pollinator and plants, especially when plants have specific relationships with a specific pollinator. And there's a science study of that. It's called phenology.
It's the timing of natural events.
Right. Well, it's amazing that things like birds that migrate long distances are able to figure out where the food is along the way, you know. That's pretty amazing. So one of the Maryland Flower asked a question, in addition to your photographs in there, you've also collected essays written by other people. Is that right?
Right.
How did you get these essays? Did you put out a call? Did you know people?
Well, go ahead.
We didn't put out a call, but I knew of certain people like Robin Wall Kimmerer. I had seen her speak at Bioneers and really loved her approach. She's a Native American author and botany teacher. And so she was one, we went to the Trust for Public Land because we wanted to do a story about the importance of protecting land and creating more public land. So we went to the Trust for Public Land. Rob and I had been photographers for them for years.
Mhm.
And so we already had a relationship, and the director wrote an essay for us, and he was so excited about it, he actually delivered it the next day. And then we would ask around and say, we're looking for, and we wanted diversity in our authors. We wanted age diversity, as well as ethnic diversity, as well as a
Gender.
variety of occupations and gender. As Rob says, we have out of 16 authors, 11 are women.
We had come up with an idea of what the different topics were we wanted to cover to tell the Wildflower story, from conservation to climate change to individual involvement. So we found people who fit those subjects and were really, really good writers. And I was the first editor for all the essays because I knew what it was I wanted to have in the book. So the first few drafts came through me, and then we had a really good professional editor that took over after that. But I wanted to make sure that the content that we wanted to talk about in the book was there. And I'd been doing conservation work for a long time. And so I had a background in natural history and geology and all those things. But it was quite a chore to wrangle 16 different authors with 16 different personalities. But
we actually worked with probably 22 different writers, but ended up with 16 of them.
Well, this whole journey from the initial idea to the finished book, it sounds like a pretty epic journey, like a cross-country trip almost, even though it was California. How did you like keep the spirit up? It sounds like it took you decades almost from the time you started till the time you finished.
It was 27 years, but instead of going to botanic gardens where we could have photographed a lot of these species and got them quickly and easily, we wanted to be out in the field with, where these flowers lived, what the natural community was they were found in. And so going out there was just a joy. I mean,
so the journey was part of it, was more enjoyable than probably the editing was, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, finding new flowers. And I don't know if Nita mentioned, we co-published with the California Native Plant Society, and we depended on chapter members to tell us where it was things were blooming when, and certain species to look for. And
is there like a hotline or something like that? Because I do remember going to Carson Pass many years ago and seeing the wonderful wildflowers there, and trying to figure out when the right time to go was. And I remember looking on the internet and I thinking, well, where's the hotline on? Come on, today's the day.
Well, for the desert, there's a website called desertusa.com, and it lists starting in January what's going on. And it's not just the deserts. They've extended it to a lot of different geographic regions. The Theodore Payne Foundation in Southern California has a wildflower hotline.
Is that right?
I think it's mainly for Southern California. And then
local CNPS chapters will post on either Facebook or on their blogs what's blooming and where. So that CNPS has 35 chapters around the state.
California
Native Plant Society. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how can people get involved in wildflower appreciation conservation efforts, especially now when we're supposed to stay home?
Well, plant the native plant garden. That's something that's really important. And
Can I just ask a devil's advocate question? I don't have a great growing conditions here, but I have planted native plants, but I've also planted native-like plants that aren't natives. What's the why are native plants better, I guess I would ask.
Well, it's not only native plants, but it's native plants that are native to your general area. That's important because there are already pollinators, there are already
Okay.
other life forms that are associated or have been
Mhm.
associated with those plants. So it's not just the beauty of the flowers. You'll attract more bees, you'll attract more
Mhm.
butterflies that have those specific relationships to the specific flowers.
Yeah,
So there are the animals that depend on those flowers are already here.
right, exactly. And they've already lost a lot of habitat because we've done
Right,
some.
right. So I know you've won a bunch of awards. Can you tell me about what the response to the book has been? As it's a long journey, and now you're finished with it, and now you're getting it out into the world. How's that going?
Well, we finished it in January, it arrived at the end of December, and we went, yay, we're free. We can go out, we can do talks, and we can be with people. And that lasted a couple of months, and then that was had to change. So we're doing online talks, virtual talks. We've had up to 300 people on a call.
Really?
San Francisco chapter of the California Native Plant Society, for example. And we've done it with bookstores. We're getting rave reviews. We received a really wonderful handwritten letter and a watercolor of flowers from an older woman who said, I had the best Mother's Day ever. My daughter gave me your book and I just loved it.
That's
and
great.
So I want to send you this painting. Well, this painting's now sitting in our living room, framed.
That's great.
We also, Peter Raven, who wrote our forward, who's one of the top botanists in the world, he knows everybody. And he sent the book to Steve Blackwell, who is the royal botanist and the former head, the queen botanist, and the former head of the Royal Botanical Gardens in Edinburgh. And he wrote a letter back to Peter thanking him for the book, and wrote just exactly what we wanted people to get from the book. It was just really hit our hearts, and in such a positive way that, yes, we did what we sent out to do, was to inspire hope and action, inspire people to take action, to look at life and see what they can do, because we include 25 things you can do to make a difference in the book itself.
The short stories are just as important as the flowers, if not more so. We wanted to use beauty to attract attention to people, and then inspire hope and action through the essays and through what they were seeing that they would want to preserve that was so beautiful. So that was the purpose of the book.
And the most prestigious award that we were really honored to get was the 2020 Ansel Adams Award for Conservation Photography from the Sierra Club.
Yeah, well, when you get Ansel Adams' name in an award, that must make you feel pretty good. Yeah. How we need to wrap it up now. How do readers find out more about you and your book? I understand you're not selling through Amazon, which I think is quite admirable, but also
it's more challenging to not in some ways, but we believe that Amazon has really affected the independent bookstores. So we said we're not going to do that. We're going to create an affiliate program so nonprofit organizations can raise money through the sale of the book and support their work. And it's also quite the book. It's 5.5 pounds. It's a good sized book. Sorry, it's hard to see what's.
Is that Antelope Valley on the front?
Yeah, that's not the exact place where it started in Antelope Valley, but that's
And then people asked what a floral portrait is, and here's an example.
Is that a hummingbird there?
It's a hummingbird that came into the frame as we were photographing.
Oh, wow, what a great photo.
This is still attached to the plant. The flower is still attached to the plant. We never, ever pick the flowers to photograph them.
Everything was done out in the field with natural light. I was always carrying about 65 pounds of gear because we had reflectors, diffusion discs, clamps, poles, plexiglass, all sorts of things. We wanted to show the flowers in their best light. So the average flower took between 45 minutes and half an hour.
An hour.
I wanted to go back and just say one thing. We've been members of the Bay Area Independent Publishers Association for years. And without everything we learned from them, we would probably not be where we are.
We definitely
Today.
wouldn't be where we
Yeah,
are today.
yeah.
So it
Well,
was,
you've also have demonstrated a great deal of patience, both between how long it took to get the book out and how long it takes to get an individual photograph too.
yeah,
Right.
3 years to work on to get the
And
book out.
I see on your on the screen there that it says wildflowerbook.com. That's how people can find out more.
Yeah, or wildflowerbooks.com. Either one will get you to
Wildflowerbooks.com. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rob and Nita. It's been a pleasure. And I would ask you what's next, but we're out of time.
Yeah, thank you for so much
John. I
time.
really appreciate it.